Again, he talks about it. He says in the not so distant future, there may be another way that your genes can change. Scientists are working on gene therapy, ways to alter your DNA or eliminate or obviate a disease, make adjustments, or to incorporate what we hope are improvements to our genes. Now, the thing to be really careful about, and this is where understanding a designer is actually really important. There are things I think they're called portal genes, but I'm not positive. And the idea of a portal gene, if that's what they're called, is there might be a gene over here that we mess with that actually has an impact on something over here. And we don't know it because we haven't quite experimented enough yet. And so we've mapped, our chromosome and all that stuff. But there are certain things that we still don't quite understand how these things are connected. And so that's where the complexity comes in, because we have this very specified complexity to our bodies, where it's not just a matter of tweaking this gene. There's a lot more to it. Again, keeping this all in mind, let us once again consider the giraffe in its natural habitat. And he goes on, he talks about the giraffe and some of the things that giraffes do. Now, it says they have a tough tongue and lips. They can just grab onto the thick part of acacia tree, which is a very prickly tree. They just slide their mouth right down to the limb, to the thin end, stripping all the leaves off as they go. Here's the thing, like I said, African acacia trees are loaded with thorns. You and I can't grab it with our bare hands, let alone our tongues. But the giraffe can. And so again, God has very clearly designed these creatures with that ability. And so their necks are really long, so they can reach really high places. They can strip the bark with a really tough tongue. But here's where I'm going to recommend a book to you. I've long since lost this book, so I'm sorry I can't reference it. But it's called The Evolution of a Creationist. And it's written by a guy who was an evolutionist. He was convinced by the evidence and became a creationist. And this guy writes about various creatures throughout the book. So he's writing kind of almost his autobiography. And throughout the book, he references various animals. And so one of the animals he references is the giraffe. And he says, let's imagine the number of changes that are going to happen for this giraffe to evolve from a short-necked animal. Its heart is going to have to pump blood all the way up into its head, which means it's going to have a very powerful heart, and it does. But not only that, I want you to imagine that you're a giraffe and you're bending your head down. So if you did this right now, like just bend over, put your head on the floor, let the blood rush to your head, and then stand up real quick and find out what happens. You won't stay standing for long, just as a hint. But what he notices is, he said, if the giraffe were startled and it were trying to run away from its prey, it would actually get lightheaded and pass out, because its head is so far away from its heart that if its head was down like this, all the blood is rushing down to its head, which that could be a problem in itself. But what happens is, if it lifts its head up like this to run away, boom, it's done. The blood rushes away from its head and it passes out. And so there are all these really cool structures that control the flow of blood, again, away from the brain, control the flow of blood going toward the brain so it doesn't overwhelm it. But then it also has this spongy layer around the brain that allows the blood to kind of pool around and so it doesn't just flow instantly back. And so those are all structures that are created in this creature that would have to evolve with it. Let me just ask you this question. If you, over time, were selecting, remember, there's nothing actually doing the selecting. It's purely natural. So, this creature survives because it reached a little higher in the tree than that one. Okay? There's a bunch of short-necked animals that still live around the giraffe, so whatever. But I want you to imagine, you are that long-necked giraffe, and somehow you've survived all the way to that point, but you didn't evolve the blood sponge layer. What happens? You fail to evolve any further. Okay, let's say you didn't evolve the proper tongue to handle the prickly branches. You're dead. Imagine you didn't evolve the heart that could pump the blood up all of these things. And so you look at this, and he'll mock the giraffe. He'll be like, there's this extra nerve that goes all the way down and then comes back up. Okay, we don't know why that nerve is there. Yes, that nerve is there in a lot of mammals. So the evidence suggests in that one instance that maybe they came from a common ancestor. But my other question is, perhaps those have a design feature we haven't figured out yet. Again, he will constantly say things like evolution promotes discovery and learning and interest. But I look at it and say, if I think that things just came about by chance, then I'm perfectly okay with saying maybe that right there is just a fluke. Again, that's what I think evolution does. Again, he says the evolutionary pressure to have longer necks was probably stronger when food supplies are scarce. Imagine a drought on the savannah, the African landscape that a European or American might describe as somewhere between a forest and a prairie. During the drought, the trees that survive probably have fewer, smaller leaves and don't carry as much water as they do when there's been plenty of rain. In this situation, all of the animals that eat acacia tree leaves can reach the leaves on the lower branches, but only the giraffes, who happen to have slightly longer necks, can keep going and reach the even higher leaves that other animals and other shorter members of their tower can't reach. Tower is a group of giraffes. But again, if you've got a 3-foot neck, the extra work to get the 4-foot or the 5-foot, and why stop at 10 foot? Why not go to 20 feet? Again, that's this idea that you have to ask these questions. And again, the thing that we've observed, and remember, we're talking about observed science. If you go to the Galapagos Islands and you watch the Galapagos Island finches, their beaks, as you can see on the cover of Darwin Devolves, all right, their beaks, this is a very famous drawing set of the Galapagos Island finches. Their beaks do change. But right after that study was finished and that drought let up and the environment kind of went back to the way it was, their beaks went back to the way they had been.